All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Magic Mics. We begin, as we do each and every single week, by introducing our co-hosts. My co-host, Ruben Bressler.
Hello.
And Aaron Campbell.
Cheerio.
Yes, and as we also begin the show each and every week, we talk about the first pick. The first thing, what's going on everybody's mind in the Magic community. Now, granted, I think there's actually a lot of what you could start with, but we're going to begin with the big announcement over the weekend, and that, of course, was Shadows of Innistrad. So, Shadows of Innistrad, I got the slide pulled up. It's coming in April 2016. I made a Magic show where I kind of, waxed nostalgia over Innistrad and why it was great and why everybody loves it and why it was such a really cool set. There is this feeling of, like, are we really going back to another plane right after we went back to another plane? Is that enough? Yeah. But, so granted, you guys feel free to watch the Magic show. You can hear a lot more of my opinions. But, Ruben, how do you feel, to sort of kick us off about Shadows of Innistrad?
Look,
Shadows over Innistrad.
Whenever you ask any Magic player, really, competitive or non-competitive, which limited format did you like the best? Which standard format did you like the best? Which set's flavor do you like the best? Innistrad is consistently top 3 in every metric that you could possibly have. Mm-hmm. Personally, I thought that the storyline for Innistrad was incredibly deep. I cared about not just the planeswalkers, but some of the legends, like Thalia. I really cared about. Avacyn was a character I really wanted to know better. Mm-hmm. The Gristlebrand Liliana dynamic was something I was really interested in. Mikaeus was a really tragic character. I really liked a lot of what Innistrad did flavorfully. And of course, in Standard, there were a ton of really awesome cards that came out that have had everlasting impact, like Snapcaster Mage, Liliana of the Veil. I loved things like Garruk Relentless. Mm-hmm. The limited format, of course, is amazing. Scorned Villagers is one of my all-time favorite limited cards. Mm-hmm. It's just such a well put together set. And for something, if you've been playing this long, you remember when the set was about to come out and they showed you, look, we're printing Magic cards that don't have Magic card printed on the back. And everyone went, what the hell is this? Why you have there are two sides? Why are there two front sides? I don't understand how you do that. And then it worked. Yeah. It was amazing. It was sometimes they go way out on a limb, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. And of course, Delver of Secrets is the one that's had the most everlasting impact. But of course, Huntmaster of the Fells,
right?
Stony Silence.
But that wasn't a double face card. That's what he's talking about.
And then of course there have been more cards that have had everlasting impact on older formats, like Stony Silence, for example.
Grafdigger's Cage.
Grafdigger's Cage also is a very good one. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite limited cards of all time, Travel Preparations.
Oh, Travel Prep was insane.
Yeah. Obviously, Flashback, Burning Vengeance, all those kind of corner case decks. I just loved everything about Innistrad. I'm super excited to be going back. And I just, if we go back to Innistrad, there's going to be Flashback. Flashback's great. I love
There's going to be Morbid. There's going to be Morbid.
Probably Morbid as well.
Morbid
was a pretty underappreciated card.
Mechanic.
Ability. A mechanic. Yeah. I think that it was just sort of not really put on any really competitive cards, unfortunately.
Tragic Slip.
Tragic Slip was a lot.
Yeah, but it doesn't see any play anymore. I mean, Tragic Slip was really the one that they pushed.
It would work really well with Exploit, for example, which I thought would be a really cool thing.
Yeah.
But, so, Aaron, how do you feel about, A, obviously coming back to Innistrad, but B, there's a lot of expectation. There's a lot of, you better not screw it up kind of feel.
Yeah, and I think some people are currently feeling that with Battle for Zendikar. I mean, the bar was so high for this set, and, to be frank, I think some people feel let down by this set. So there is sort of that attitude going into Innistrad. I want to go back to what you said about it being too soon for a return set, because Maro tweeted something on November 1st and said that we now do blocks 50% new and 50% return. That means sometimes 2 new or 2 returns will be back to back, and he covers the last 7 sets. So he says Zendikar, original Zendikar was new, Scars was Return, Innistrad was new, Return was Return, Theros was new, Cons was new, Battle's Return, and Shadows is Return. So when he puts it
Okay.
that way, it doesn't seem so bad. I actually came back to the game for Innistrad. I didn't play the game for 10 years because I was too busy playing other games, and I can specifically remember the article that made me come back to the game. I was reading Gavin Verhey's Reconstructed column, and he built a Splinter Fright deck, and I was just like, what are these cards? Like, this is me. Like, I haven't been playing for 10 years, but this is something I want to be doing. And I remember I went to my local game store, I bought a box of Dark Ascension and a box of Innistrad, and I didn't come back for Innistrad, but that was the time that I happened to come back, and so I'm one of those people that has a lot of expectations for this set, because I was a big fan of Olivia Voldaren and Liliana of the Veil, obviously. Splinter Fright was the card I could never make work, no matter how hard I tried.
Right.
Obviously, I love cards as flashback. Maybe they can work in Dredge. So I'm excited for this set, and I just hope they don't screw it up.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I would specifically say that Battle for Zendikar say it screwed it up per se, but I feel like now that it's that it was spoiled.
Were too damn high.
Well, and where are they now for Innistrad? Right? Where are they now for Shadows? Like, dude, they're right up here. Like, you better have a Liliana, you better have a Snapcaster, you better have the most insane flavor, you better have the best draft environment, or you are letting everyone down who has these expectations. It's a lot of pressure.
Even now, it's
absolutely.
like I think people are coming. I've seen people coming up with worst case scenarios. Like when the trailer came out, there were people, because there's like a wilting effect that happens where you see the tombstone kind of wilt, and there were also trees that were wilting. And some people thought those were tentacles, and they're like, if Emrakul is in this set, I'm like, guys, it's just tree branches. Like Emrakul is probably not in the set, but there were people that were already planning for that. They were already coming up with reasons why the set
you have
was
the
going to be a
symbol of
bust.
Avacyn on a tombstone, right?
Right.
So the tombstone of Avacyn theoretically could be Avacyn's tomb, right? And then it shows the sort of twisting effect on stone in addition to the trees. Trees I could understand bending, that could be wind. A stone tombstone is something else.
Yeah.
And so but there's a lot of things that could be doing that, a Gristlebrand style character could be having that kind of effect. An earth elemental could probably bend stone. So it doesn't have to be Emrakul, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we've probably had our fill of Emrakul for at least a little bit with Battle for Zendikar. She is probably making an appearance later in the block.
I would expect her an oath in some form or fashion.
Yeah, and for Shadows of Innistrad, jeez, I expect. I expect some callbacks, but I expect a lot to be different. For example, I expect the Planeswalker lineup to be different. I would expect Jace to make an appearance on Innistrad, for example.
I would love to see Veraska there, like a Gorgon horrifying snake. Like, I think she'd fit in well there.
Yeah, her and Medusa hanging out, chilling.
Tamio, I know people love Tamio, and they're like, yes, give me, especially with the moon and the horror, bring Tamio back.
Tamio?
Socks with sandals.
Socks with sandals. Got it. That's socks with sandals. Well, I need my return to Kamigawa before I die. I just want you to know that. Before I am lowered into dirt or burnt into cremation, I need to go back to Kamigawa.
Evan, stick around for the finisher. We might have something to say about that.
Did you see, speaking of Kamigawa, Mishra's Photoshop was coming up with all of these memes of, like, because people were going, it's too soon to be going to a return set. And there was one where he was like, Revenge of Umezawa, because who else do you really remember from Kamigawa?
Yeah,
and, like,
exactly.
there were all these other ones that were just so funny.
Let's go back to Ravnica, I guess.
Clouds over Dominaria.
Clouds over Dominaria was insane.
They were so funny.
Oh my god, that guy is awesome.
I am super excited to go back to Innistrad though, because I just loved everything about that set. I think that, and it also, remember in previous episodes, Evan, you said that they could print expedition style cards, not just for lands.
Yes.
If we go back to Innistrad, they can definitely print an expedition style Liliana of the Veil. If they don't, even if they don't reprint Liliana,
I've been saying it since day one.
Style.
Snapcaster.
Huntmaster of the Fells, Snapcaster Mage, even Delver of Secrets, I guess. I mean, full art, like foil, double-sided Delver of Secrets would definitely be something people would be interested in. It's a bit of a stretch, but I think that it's something that they could do. So, if they're only going with cards that are legacy staples, for example, then that's something that they could do. And this is another example of a place that they could implement it.
Yeah, I have to say there's one thing I don't want to see.
Which is?
What's that?
So, I'm fine with Morbid. And I love Undying, but I do not want to see any Miracle.
Miracle was such
Miracle is problematic as hell. Do
It's-
not even get me started.
one of the most exciting mechanics ever made.
It is. It's
is.
super good for TV.
It's super good
Yeah.
feeling, super bad feeling, but you're up here. There's no middle ground with Miracle. It's like, Morbid's okay. Morbid sometimes happens. It's all right. Whatever. Who cares? No. You're either like the Miracle's the best thing ever, or you are hating life. There is no in between.
Well, I think I'm only hating it more because of what it's doing in Legacy, where it's like, the whole point of Miracle was that it was supposed to be a miracle, and it has reached a point in Legacy where you can essentially sculpt your deck to have it when you want it between Top and Ponder and Brainstorm, and so it's not really a miracle anymore. It's I need a Terminus. I'm going to have a Terminus.
Well, yeah, but remember, one of the biggest Miracle cards that like blew up in spoiler season, $35 pre-order, was Temporal Mastery. Did absolutely nothing. Everyone was flipping out. It's going to destroy Legacy. You're giving Legacy time walks, and nothing happened. Nothing.
It won exactly one Open in Standard.
And the Pro Tour. But it's okay.
And the Pro Tour. But it won one Open
that was
in Standard, and that was it.
Yep.
And then it won the Pro Tour in the hands of Alex Hayne, because that was a block Pro Tour, and he put every Miracle that he could in the same deck.
Yep.
And also Alexander Hayne is a master that never loses at Magic.
Yeah, he's incredibly good at Magic, so... Yeah, so it was one of those, like, I remember, I lived through Bonfire. I know what it feels like. I hope everyone has seen the GIF. If you haven't, just Google LSV Kibler Bonfire GIF. You'll find it. And it is when the US team at Worlds gets completely crushed at the last turn possible when the guy top decks Bonfire and Kibler at LSV have this is just insane. Just, they both know.
It's not even just those two. You can rewatch that GIF 30 times. And
you can
Alex
clearly
Binnick,
see.
Alex Binnick has an awesome reaction. Joe Panaccio has an awesome reaction. Brian Kibler has an awesome reaction. Randy Bueller's in the background has a great reaction. The captain of the Chinese Taipei team has a great reaction. All the players on the team that cast the Bonfire have amazing reactions, varying between did that really just happen to, oh my god, we won, to I'm American, but playing on the Chinese Taipei team, I don't know how to react to this, which was really funny. And then, Kibler, LSV, it's such a good GIF.
It gives and it gives is what it does. But so Miracle was good from it was exciting to watch. It was exciting Magic to watch, but it was kind of miserable to play against. It really was. When your opponent gets the Bonfires off the top 2 times in a row or something, you felt really bad about it.
Or they're always sandbagging it with their Sensei's Divining Top. Not that I'm bitter.
Right.
Yeah, not that you're bitter. Not that you have any held resentment there towards Miracles players, but it is Return to Innistrad, not Return to Avacyn Restored.
But it was in
so
that
it's
block,
possible
though.
we won't see...
Well, it was
is
Innistrad
the same
block. Yeah.
Right, but the limited format, for example, was not including Avacyn Restored. So we're almost certainly going to see the return of things like Flashback and Morbid, but Miracle could be on the sidelines.
I mean, the problem, they did that thing where they were like, we're sure this mechanic's great, but we're not going to go all the way. So, because they did double face cards in Innistrad and Dark Ascension, but they're like, for Avacyn Restored, we're not going to do that. We're going to come up with something totally different and make one of the worst limited environments ever. And so, how you liked Innistrad? Let's show you how bad it can get, So,
well, keep in mind that now this will be after we've moved to 2-block rotations.
Right.
So we will not have that 3rd block problem anymore.
Exactly. I want them to go completely nuts with the flip cards. I thought it was great. First time they did the Legendary into Planeswalker stuff in Origins. Like, just go nuts. Go completely nuts.
Yeah.
Can't hurt my feelings.
I have to say, when Innistrad was standard legal, that was the last time I also really enjoyed a standard format. I played Constellation and Theros, and that was fun, but I think back to the decks I played when Thragtusk was legal and Olivia was legal, and those were happy times for me. I would love to have a reason to get involved in standard again, and maybe it'll take me there.
All right.
That was the very end of blue-white sort of tempo. Being a real powerhouse in standard. We haven't really had any. Mana Leak was legal, so that was one thing, but we haven't had anything really like that in a while.
Right.
So it would be interesting if you could bring a blue aggro deck back.
Well, there was the there was right when Innistrad came out, and that was when you had mono blue, the phantom creatures and stuff.
The phantom deck, and then the Champion of the Parish deck became a thing.
Yeah, and then then that went on to the next block, and then it changed, and it was more Thragtusk type Unburial Rites
Black
stuff.
Red Zombies.
Black Red Zombies was sweet. Super cool. So we're gonna move on here to talk a little bit about the Commander spoilers. A week from Friday, Commander 2015 is coming, and we're going to talk about a few spoilers, but I also want to talk about what I feel is kind of the design overview of Commander 2015, which Wizards, I think, just does not care about power level anymore. Absolutely, whatever. If it costs 4 or more mana, it can do literally stone anything. They don't care. It's not going to go to Legacy. It doesn't matter. If any 5 mana thing just does whatever you want it to do on whatever mode, you get 7 modes, pick 12. Who cares? I don't care. Like, just do whatever you want, because these cards aren't going to go anywhere, so they're just going to go in that format. So there's 3 cards I want to talk about.
They're just going to get spell pierced. Why do we care?
That's right. Whatever. Just get force wilt. What are you doing, noob? Hit you with my Delver flipped. So I brought up on the screen now 3 cards. Blade of Selves, which discusses Myriad, one of the strangest, most wordy mechanics I've ever seen, but I still think it's brilliant. Blade of Selves itself being what could be one of the most busted commander cards of all time. Equipping Blade of Selves to any legendary creature with, anything that triggers on when it enters the battlefield or when it dies, like any of the Kamigawa legendary dragons. For example, Kakusho, and you got 4 opponents. Oh, great. You're just going to drain everybody for 20. That's awesome.
It sounds like fun.
It sounds amazing. You have Yosei. Okay, I'll tap down literally every permanent that isn't mine. Thanks. Card is totally sweet. Myriad is weird, but it's cool because you have these mechanics that are a million lines long, but it doesn't matter because it's never going to affect any format but Commander, because you're never going to have that scenario any other place. Next up, and we'll talk about these a little bit more in depth from you guys, but next up is Ezuri Claw of Progress. And so all right, so to back up, for those who are on the podcast, just listen to his audio, is Blade of Selves is a 2-mana artifact equipment. It equips for 4 mana, and it has Myriad. Whenever it attacks, for each opponent other than defending player, you may put a token that's a copy of that creature onto the battlefield tapped and attacking that player or planeswalker he or she controls. Exile the tokens at end of combat. Basically, if you're playing one-on-one, it does nothing. But for each player beyond one-on-one, you're able to get a copy of whatever creature is attached to Blade of Selves. Absolutely absurd. Ezuri Claw of Progress is where we saw Ezuri. It was, what was his name? Something Leader?
Renegade Leader.
Renegade Leader from New Phyrexia? Is that right?
Yes.
That block, yeah.
Yeah, from the Scars of Mirrodin block. He has been completed, if you will, and is now Ezuri Claw of Progress. He is a Phyrexian blue-green 2 colorless 3/3 legendary elf warrior. When a creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you get an experience counter. Experience counters are cool new things in this set where players get them and you never lose them. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, put X +1/+1 counters on another target creature you control, where X is the number of experience counters you have. And there's a lot of cool things that trigger off experience counters in the set and whatnot, and that's really neat. So the last one I want to talk about, and we're going to delve into each one of these, Daxos the Return, which has the saddest story ever. We're going to get to it. Black, white, colorless 2/2. Legendary zombie soldier. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you get an experience counter. Now note, like all other triggered abilities, these creatures must be on the battlefield for you to get those experience counters. If they're your commanders, you're not going to get them. They need to be on the battlefield. Black, white, and a colorless : put a white and black spirit enchantment creature token onto the battlefield. It has this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of experience counters you have. So there's Ezuri is a mythic, so he leads kind of his own deck, and then Daxos is a mythic, he kind of leads his own deck that are all themed that way. So guys, talk to me a little bit about, I've kind of gushed over Blade of Selves. It is just like the commander players just flipped out when they saw this thing. It was absolutely crazy. So, how about somebody tell me about Ezuri. Tell me about what's cool and what's different, what's neat about Ezuri. Why do you like Ezuri?
So Ezuri is interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, it has Hill Giant stats, which means that it's cheaper than most legends, right? So if you're playing a blue-green commander deck, usually you want to have something like Experiment Kraj is one of the big ones, or you play Momir Vig, which cost 5 and 6. And they're, Experiment Kraj is big, but it's 6 mana. Momir Vig's a 2/3 for 5, so you're not getting great stats just on the outset. 3/3 for 4, slightly bigger. Not a lot of lightning bolt effects seeing play in that format. So unless you're getting Swords to Plowshare, which all your legends are getting Swords to Plowshare, it's got good stats. But you also get to play it in a deck with something, for example, like Master Biomancer that actually gets to use the +1/+1 counters that it gets from those experience counters. So also, another interesting thing about the blue-green guy, Ezuri, is that you have a lot of proliferate in blue-green. And you get to add a lot of experience counters to yourself because you can target yourself with the experience counters just like you could target your opponent with the infect. counters and the +1/+1 counters and all the charge counters. There's a lot of stuff having to do with Ezuri Claw of Progress. So I would expect this guy to be a pretty... I mean, it's tough to take advantage of him because he's another comes into play, doesn't do anything immediately, planeswalker, or not planeswalker, commander. So he is... When you play him, it gives your opponent an opportunity to untap and deal with him without having affected the board in any way. So that's one problem I see with Ezuri, but he's a super cool build around me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Aaron, tell me the story of Daxos. What is going on with this card?
I wanted to touch on Ezuri for just a second.
It.
So, I love it from a flavor standpoint, and I especially ship him with Glissa. Like, I think Glissa and Ezuri are like the new Phyrexian Elvish power couple. Like, I'm totally here for it.
Nice.
I think Ezuri would be good. I actually thought of Ezuri in two ways. Like, I'm not a big commander buff, but I immediately thought of him in like a blue-green infect. Like, I think that could be really scary.
Sure.
I also thought of him in just straight elf tribal. I mean, elves is known for sort of sneezing out a bunch of elves, and all those elves are typically 2 power or less. So you just start popping out all these little elves. He's triggering left and right, and so I think that could be really scary. Like, they come into play as little 1/1s, but it's like, oh, here you go, girl. Here's some counters, and I think that could get out of hand really fast. But in terms of Daxos, I wasn't entirely clear on his story until very recently. So it's my understanding that Daxos and Elsbeth had history. They went on some quests together, and at one point they had finally acknowledged their feelings for each other, and they were trying to, you know, sort of enjoy that or whatever. And they went to confront Xenagos, and when they did, I think I just skipped a part here. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. So they led the Akros army to victory. They were celebrating. They were alone in their tent. And then they realized their feelings for each other, very Starship Troopers. And but it was not to be. Xenagos appeared as they slept, and Xenagos created her darkest memory, which is a Phyrexian Obliterator. Elsbeth kills the Obliterator, only to find out that it's Daxos. She just killed her man.
And this is Daxos of Meletis, for those who don't remember.
Yes.
So then Boothang goes to the underworld, and then she tries to make a deal to get him back. Erebos is like, sure. So kills her. She goes to the underworld to get him back, and then he makes a deal down there to get her back. So he comes back up as she's going down, and that's the Daxos that we're stuck with right now.
So he's wearing so that's why he has this kind of weird mask on. Yes, that's the death mask.
So the way that the Theros underworld works is that it's a place. There is a location that when you die, you go to it. You can return, theoretically, but those that are returned, quote unquote, for example, people like the Grey Merchant of Asphodel also have these gold masks on their faces. They return in body only. Their soul and their memories remain in the underworld. And so they return as shells of their former selves. They have their skills. They have their bodies. They have some fleeting, they know how to like speak. But they're really empty inside. They're dead behind the eyes, as it were. And so there are towns like Asphodel where the risen dead live, but it's not really living. They don't have family lives. They can't create new relationships. And so those who come back are really limited to. So, for example, warriors that come back are good at fighting, but they don't remember what they were fighting for. Poets that come back are passionate, but they don't remember who they were passionate about. And so that's really the tragic part of Daxos, is that he wanted so badly to come back, but I don't know too much of the exact story with Daxos specifically, but if he's got the gold mask, it seems as if he doesn't have all of himself with him to bring him back to the living world. And oh, by the way, the person he came back to find, Elspeth, is in the underworld. Yeah. So that's a bit of a problem as well.
I like the card, though. I mean, as somebody who really enjoys Constellation, you know, the fact that it has an enchantment theme, like, I would play this. Like, if somebody tossed me a Daxos deck or had an idea for one, I would sleeve it up. Like, I'd play that.
He's cheap. He's cool. Yeah. But ultimately, it's just like, for me, that story, that lore is so heartbreaking. It's sad. It's, you know, it's just like, it's one of these kind of almost missed encounters type thing. And it's just, they're both trying to get back with each other. And then one was manipulated, and then the other was manipulated. And now they're both just kind of on opposite ends.
It's very Romeo and Juliet-ish, where one kills themselves and the other one kills themselves, thinking the other one killed themselves, and then they pass each other just as one of them's dying. It's very depressing.
Or as the kids say, the gods did them dirty.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, the gods are kind of awful. I mean,
They are kind of
Heliod was
crazy.
the one that ended up stabbing Elspeth, right? Heliod was the one that ended up stabbing Elspeth in the back, literally and figuratively, at the end of that story. So you know, it's not like Erebos is the only bad guy. We got white bad guys, black bad guys, red bad guys, because Perforos wasn't the nicest character ever. So you know, you got and Thassa had her deal with Kiora. You know, the gods are kind of they got their own problems, and when they mess in the affairs of mortals, it's even worse.
There you go. So we're going to move on now to gather the townsfolk. What was going on in the Reddit world and the Twitter world? Well, this past week, Star City Games Organized Play announced a lot of changes. So I'm not going to speak to them. However, I invite Aaron or Ruben to discuss any of these changes, sort of go over them if you don't mind, and sort of discuss a little bit about what they are, what they mean, and what you guys think about them.
Aaron, you're more pro legacy than me, so I would request that you take the lead on describing the changes.
Well, there were actually a lot of changes. Like, I wasn't going to necessarily start with that. Can I cover some other ones?
Cover the changes if you don't mind.
You go in whichever order you please.
You're so petty, Ruben. I love it. So they first announced that, you know, obviously with you, if you win an invitational, you can qualify for a Pro Tour that way. So that's really cool. They added SCG regionals, which are really nice. They're also adding a states feature to Canada called provincial events. So if you play in Canada, you can get a taste of what we get for our states, which is really cool. Because I know Canada doesn't have it as easy as we do in terms of availability for events and being able to travel to them. So I'm always happy to see Canada thrown a bone. The two biggest changes that I noticed was that the classics, so the events that you get to play on Sunday, what they used to be as 5Ks, are now being called classic events, and those events will no longer offer cash prizes. You will only receive tickets, and those tickets can be used for a prize wall, which is going to be a feature of the Opens now. And people were really upset about that. You know, there are some people that want the best prize support. They want money, to be frank. And so the idea that you're playing for either boxes or packs or uncut sheets really turned some people off. So that was a really controversial decision. And the other thing is that Legacy is not going to be an invitational format anymore. The invitational formats are just going to be, at least for 2016, it's modern and standard, modern. That combined with the fact that the Legacy 5Ks are not going to have cash prizes, those two things have led people to predict the death of Legacy, as it were.
Big deal is that Legacy will no longer be parts of invitationals.
Yeah. But, you know, it is leading people to say that. And then, you know, people saying that Legacy is just not bringing them the business that they want it to. I don't think Star City explicitly said that, but people are reading into that and saying that that's the case. And I don't think it's going to be the death of Legacy. You know, I think that we're seeing events like Bazaar of Moxen, for example. Bazaar of Moxen just added Legacy to their staple of events, which people overseas are really excited about. You have Eternal Extravaganza, which is an East Coast thing run by Tales of Adventure. Great turnout. They did it twice this year, and that was a really good time. Card Kingdom is looking to expand and create their own 1K or 2Ks for Legacy. I'm not really sure on that, but you know, the Legacy community is passionate, and I think if people want to do it, I think either a TO will step up or even a local game store like Tales of Adventure is going to step up. I don't think I think there's definitely going to be, you know, possibly a decrease, but I don't think it's a death, as people are predicting. I do feel really bad for the West Coast, however, because Star City said that they basically won't be doing very many Opens out there. And I know so many people that if you gave them that opportunity, I know so many people on the West Coast that are hungry for that and would grind the crap out of them.
Absolutely. That's the part that actually, personally, I'm most upset about, is that, you know, Star City Games hasn't come to the West Coast a lot anyway, and being a West Coast player, you know, living in Las Vegas, maybe we get an invitational. Luckily, we get one this year, but we're lucky to get an Open maybe 6 times a year, right? Yeah. Because, you know, it's tough to transport stuff from Roanoke, Virginia. You know, it's a long trek to put all your you know, your card collection into a U-Haul and transport it across the country 6 to 8 times a year. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and it's tough to not have that level of involvement in the West Coast. And Star City Games, I forget where exactly they said this, but they would be interested in partnering with a West Coast company of some kind if they were interested in starting a West Coast style Open series kind of thing, which I would love. obviously I just want to have more big Magic events on the West Coast. F&M doesn't cut it for me, you know what I mean? I need the big tournaments. I want to try to test myself against the best that the West Coast has to offer. I would like to have bigger events like that. But
you a size queen, Ruben?
A little bit. A little bit of a size. It's a size issue for me, just a little bit. And so, you know, the SCG Open Series, which is now being called the SCG Tour hashtag, is they've sort of changed a lot of their outlook on things. The Classic Series was a thing that ran alongside the Open Series at one point. And they would be held in relatively smaller cities. So, for example, you would have an Open on the West Coast or in Kansas City or something like that, and then you'd have a Classic in Richmond, right? And so now, instead of doing it that way, they're doing the Classics alongside the Opens for smaller events. The other big change is that instead of there being four invitationals, there's going to be 3 now, and no more Legacy at invitationals. That's the biggest deal to me, because Legacy has always been at the forefront of Star City Games' sort of mission statement. I've always thought that because they had so much invested in Legacy, they're the world's largest Magic card dealer. It says so right on the website. And they always deal in Legacy staples. I thought for sure they had more invested in Legacy than everyone else, but they're taking a step back from Legacy, which is very interesting to me, because I would have thought that you know they're the main people running Legacy tournaments as it is. When they cut back on Legacy, it seems like the entire Legacy format is sized down, and so there's going to be, in my opinion, I would think that there'd be less call for Legacy cards. And therefore the prices would go down. It's possible that the inherent fans of Legacy are going to keep the prices up, right? And just being a cult fan, you know, just like fans of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, it's not the most popular movie in the world, but the fans love it so much that it stays coming back to theaters because people have the Rocky Horror Nights and stuff like that. That's sort of, well, that's more like vintage, but, you know, Legacy is becoming more like that, right? And so taking a step back from Legacy is really interesting to me. I guess they're trying to appeal to a wider market focused on the East Coast, getting more of their players from the East Coast and sort of condensing their market down to size. From a business perspective, I am not a business scientist. I don't know. I didn't go to school for that. I went to school to talk and to write. So from a business perspective, I don't know what the numbers say. But it seems like all the Legacy tournaments that I was watching that SCG ran were of similar, if not greater size than the standard tournaments. And certainly when you watch Vintage Champs or Legacy Champs, those events have the same viewership as large GPs, because people love to watch those old events even if they can't play in them, right? Because you like watching things you can't do. I watch the NBA. I can't dunk a basketball, right? You like watching people play Black Lotus even though you'll never play a Black Lotus in your life, right? So you get to live vicariously through people that are comboing off on turn 1 and stuff like that. That's super interesting for me. And so it's going to be more like that for Legacy, I guess. So it's there's some give, there's some take. I don't love some of the changes. I think that they must have run all the numbers and it makes more sense. And of course there's some incidental as a result of cutting down the number of invitationals and honing the locations. There's some changes to the Players' Championship at the end of the year as well, but that's all minutia that I don't really care about right now. But a lot of the changes make sense. I'm sad about them, but they make sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, all right. So you anything else on those guys? Just so I was going to keep on moving.
Evan Irwin's great. Magic's great. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, I think that this is, you know, there was a lot of hubbub, especially from people about the Classics not giving out money. This was the last thing I wanted to say. They're not giving out cash anymore. But if the prize walls are run in the same way that GPs have prize walls, for example, or before Magic even adopted the prize wall, Yu-Gi-Oh had the prize wall thing happening. You can turn the prize Disney dollars that you get into booster packs. And if they keep the same quote-unquote 10 ticks to one booster pack, you're going to have no problem recouping your losses. If you can't turn 180 ticks into 18 booster packs into cash, you got bigger problems. So I think that that's being a little bit overblown. And I don't mind the prize wall being a thing. We'll have to see the specifics of the prize wall when it comes out, but I think that one's a little bit people are doing a little bit too much of their Chicken Little with that one.
Well, I do have to say though, if you play Miracles though, and you think Legacy's not, go ahead and sell that deck, girl. Sell that collection.
Sell off
Throw
your
away them
$35.
terminuses.
I assume they're like $35 Sensei's Divining Tops.
Yeah,
Jeez.
you
Get rid of
know,
them.
you
Yeah,
can use
never
that
need 'em
terminus. Use that terminus for kindling around the fire where it's getting cold outside. You throw some swords to plowshares in there, girl. You go.
Use those rest in pieces as coasters for your favorite frothy beverage.
Yes.
Yeah, get rid of them all.
Yes.
All right, so I'll end this little bit here by bringing up the kitchen links.
Yes. Oh
The
my god.
First quarter
Yeah.
open series playmat.
I am in love with this playmat. I wanted to talk about this because I think that they've done a lot of these. This is the best one, like by a wide margin, except for one thing. They should have called it Kitten Finks instead of Kitchen Links. I mean, I get that Lynx is
Well, but they're Lynxes.
No, I get it. I
Lynx.
understand. No, Kevin, I
It's a
He
Lynx.
went to
better.
school for writing and reading. He knows.
Yeah, man. Reading and writing.
read
Not
right.
so much arithmetic, but this could have very easily. This is adorable, and the color scheme of Kitchen Finks just works so well to translate into this sort of parody art, and oh my god, I'm in love with that one.
And the milk and stuff, and it's just
perfect.
yeah. Andrea Radek was the artist; she did a great job. Yeah, so that was a really cool thing. So, all right, we're gonna move on to Going Infinite. Now, some have called us the Saffron Olive Fan Club,
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
of which I am a proud member because he's just doing better content than most. So deal with it. But
Everybody else just needs to step their cookie up.
they really do, because this guy is just defining a lot of great
crushing
stuff.
it, yeah.
He's crushing it. He brings up that the current standard environment is the most expensive since Cawblade. Since Jace the Mind Sculptor and Stoneforge Mystic were hanging out in standard, this was the most expensive one. So, and actually, based on what he had pre-ban Cawblade, June 1st, 2011, that deck cost $652. The Jeskai Black deck, as it is defined right now, costs $748. This is even more expensive than it used to be. And he has the charts here that brings up all the, how expensive the standard was at any one time. And our standard environment is very expensive. And it just feels like, it's a combination of things. There's a few things. One, you have Jace Viren's overpowered development mistake, and which should not have happened the way it happened, but it's happened, and we're going to deal with it. And you're going to have to find your copies if you want to be competitive in the current environment, or you're going to have to get 4 of the only true power aberration of Battle for Zendikar, which is Gideon, ally of Zendikar. So more or less, there's decks, either you got your Jace and your Gideon, or you just have your Gideon and you wish you could afford Jaces because they're ridiculously expensive. And so with those two things combined, plus fetch lands,
Right.
plus battle lands,
Yeah. And that's the biggest deal to me.
it just
is that
combines.
you look at standard Jeskai Black,
Mm-hmm.
and you got your 3 to 4 Gideons, you got your 4 Jaces. You also have the most expensive rare, not mythic, but most expensive rare from Magic Origins in Hangerback Walker. I think it's the most expensive. It's like it was like $15 last I looked. But more importantly than that, you have Prairie Stream, Sunken Hollow, Smoldering Marsh.
They're running more fetches
Mystic
than
Monastery.
modern decks do.
Yeah,
Like, it's
Flooded
insane.
Strand, 3 Flooded Strand, 4 Bloodstained Mire, 4 Polluted Delta.
Girl.
That's a lot of fetch lands. And so you run into that problem. You have 4 of Jace. Sounds familiar for an overpowered, overpriced standard deck.
There you
You
go.
have 4 of another super powerful white planeswalker named Gideon. Sounds pretty similar to something that happened in the past. You got like 20 super expensive rare lands. I think I've heard this before. So, it's not too surprising. And also, all the spells are rare or mythic. You look at the rest of the deck. Butcher the Horde sometimes makes an appearance. You've got Mantis Rider, Dragon Master Outcast, Crackling Doom, Ojutai's Command, Dig Through Time. These are all rares or mythics. And so
Tasigur.
you don't...
Yeah.
Tasigur, exactly. You don't have the support structure of good uncommons like you do with traditional Abzan, for example, where you've got things like Abzan Charm, which is perfectly reasonably priced. You've got things like, Wild Slash, which I guess makes appearances in this deck too, but it's not the centerpiece as it is in some other decks. And so, Valorous Stance is another example of a really versatile uncommon that these decks also run, but they aren't centerpieces. You know what I mean? And so you have control decks that have things like Negate and, Dispel and Commons. And this deck just doesn't use that kind of stuff. So this, and also other 4-color cards or 4-color decks that are trying to cast things like the Woodland Behemoth, it just makes for a super expensive standard environment, which we kind of saw coming when they spoiled these battle lands, right?
I mean, basically, they made fetches explode. That's kind of a point that he makes here, is that now you have perfect mana to play every good card, which means everything's rare and everything's mythic, and everything is exploded in price that is basically anywhere near those factors. And as he mentions here sort of in his summary, there's no real solution to the problem. If you don't already own fetch lands and Jaces and Gideons, you're going to have to invest in $500 worth of cards, many of which will rotate in less than 6 months, or you're not going to be able to play a tier 1 deck. That's incredibly impacting.
Well, I think the other thing that's missing, which Stefan talks about, is the lack of a safety valve deck. And one of the examples he likes to give is when Innistrad was standard legal. Jund was expensive back in the day when you were running Thragtusk and Huntmasters and Olivia's. That was like almost a $700 deck. But you had mono red with Hellrider that cost you like $100.
Right.
The only thing close to that now is a Tarka Red, and a Tarka Red's over $200. So the typical, go-to choice in that situation would be to play mono red. But even the mono red deck is expensive for being a mono red deck. Like, when Theros or Khans was expensive, we had things like blue white heroic. Like, there's always been decks that were as competitive to cancel that out, where if you couldn't afford all of those things, you still had some options. And as of right now, there are people that are spitting out these budget decks, but they just don't hold a candle to things like Jeskai Black. You're so unlikely to do well in that sort of format or that environment. And I think that's another thing that's really hurting right now too. Jeebus wrote a retort to this, to sort of, for the people that think that this is crazy. And I agreed with Jeebus before, and I don't agree with him now. The two reasons being, so Jeebus is trying to say that, well, it's not expensive because you guys should have been preparing for this. And that's true, but the thing about the previous standard formats is that even if you didn't prepare for this, you were still okay. And that's not the case right now. Like you just said, you need your Jaces, you need your Gideons, and if you don't have them, you're a little too late for that. The other part of Jeebus's retort that I kind of thought was a little silly was he was like, oh, well, if you just budgeted it, that's $10.80 per week, like Christian Children's Fund or something. And I'm like... I don't know anybody that pays for their deck in installments. Like, when I see a deck that I love, I want it now. Like,
put that fetch land on layaway for me.
I want it now.
For 3 months.
And I mean, you could look at something like Dark Jeskai and be like, oh, well, it's only 20 easy payments of $9. But when you've got an open to go to next week, you're not going to futz around with payment plans and budgeting. Yeah. So the fact that the fact that he would look at it like that and say, well, it's totally possible if you just make installments. Nobody I know does that. Like, when you see a deck that you love, you want it now. And when you rush the TCG Player or you rush the Cool Stuff Inc. and you go to get that deck and you see that it's $700, you're not going to want to wait 20 weeks to have that deck. And even if you were to do that, there's a chance that that deck might not even be viable by the time you could afford those payments.
Right. I mean, you have the he's talking about like comic books and stuff. And if you buy a comic book every month, how much does that add up to, and yada, yada. But like for me, when we're talking about the price of standard, a price of a format, which means I have no cards. I need to get all the cards. How much does it cost? Whether it's the best deck, whether it's the worst brew thing, whether it's the mono red kind of, budget thing, the blue white heroic budget thing. That's what I'm talking about. You can sort of frame it however you want to frame it in terms of how you pay for it. But for me, it's like you start at $0. How do I get the Jeskai Black deck? Well, it's an arm, leg, kidney, and your firstborn's name. So it just is what it is. You've got
more kids, Evan. You'll be fine.
Here's
the most ironic thing for me is that the finals of the last Pro Tour was just playing Jeskai, right?
Yeah.
And Abzan,
yep.
Which are 3-color decks. And obviously the 4-color decks are going to be slightly more expensive because you want slightly more duels. But the ironic thing to me is you've still got decks like, for example, the blue-black Aristocrats style thing that Kalkano and the rest of Target played at the Pro Tour. Green-white Megamorph coming into the Pro Tour was one of the most touted decks. Those are 2-color decks they're still super expensive because centerpieces of those decks aren't just Windswept Heath, Polluted Delta, Sunken Hollow, and Canopy Vista. You've also got things like Blood-Soaked Raider and random rares that are also 4-ofs in these decks. You don't have these support uncommons and commons like you do in old traditional standards.
Sure, that was Bloodsoaked Champion for what it's worth, but for either way, yeah, but I understand, and it's a very rare centric, it's a very expensive centric type format that we're kind of in now, and it's always feels like kind of like the brewer's dilemma. It's like, well, if the brewer couldn't make it happen, they have a mono red outlet. Well, now the brewer just can't make it happen. The mono red player can't make it happen. You're just going to have to struggle and save up and put in your monthly installments. Maybe you too can play in this format.
It's just the convergence of a lot of different things happening at the same time. We've got this battle land fetch land conundrum that makes mana bases expensive. We've got an overpriced Jace that makes things expensive. We've got an overpriced Gideon that makes things expensive. And the engines that make decks work are also pretty expensive. The Den Protector Deathmist Raptor thing is pretty expensive. There are expensive parts to all of the different types of decks. And so the problem is multiple layers deep.
Oh yes.
And it just happens every once in a while. But it certainly isn't aided by the fact that you can go Plains, Forest, Sunken Hollow, and have perfect mana. That doesn't help things for sure.
It's just a weird, I don't know. It's one of those, like, I hope Wizards really understood what they were doing with the dual lands in Battle for Zendikar and kind of knew that this was going to be, like, you're just going to have that weird thing. It's like plains, Cinderglade. Like,
yeah, exactly.
What? It's
Plains,
weird.
Cinderglade.
Yeah, so, you're going to have that weird kind of, like, it's perfect mana. It's just, it's achieved in a very strange way. All right,
and
so.
Oh, by the way, in our perfect mana environment, the most powerful creature is still XX. Hangerback Walker.
Oh, Lord.
Those are like $15 a piece still, and they're running every deck. So it's like, that's still a big problem. You need 4 of them. That's $60 sunk right there.
And that's them going down because they were printed in an event deck or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's after they had a price
difference. Multiple layers to the problem here. Yes. And Saffron Olive has graphs and stuff. He's a Magic deck scientist. I would go read his stuff.
And I put some of that on the screen for people who are watching to be able to see some of that stuff. But ultimately, it's been really interesting. So we're gonna move on now as we're kind of winding down here to some splash damage, to something that kind of happened in the last day or so. I don't really know how to start it, and I don't really know how to talk about it intelligently, which I think was kind of the problem to start with, to be honest. Let's just kind of frame it that way. Travis Wu, who created content, past tense, for Channel Fireball, was suspended from Channel Fireball for his comments regarding anti-Semitism, the Holocaust, and Adolf Hitler during his stream. And this is one of those things that I don't want to say the wrong thing myself. I just want to, like, you know what I mean? I just kind of want to, like, put it on the shelf and just be like, you see that?
Yeah.
Isn't that bad?
Don't do that. Yeah.
Let's not. Ruben, where do I begin? Where do I start? How do you start?
Right. So, I want to preface what I'm about to say by saying that I don't think Travis is a bad person. I think that he made a bad mistake and should be punished for it. But I hope it doesn't follow him for the rest of his life. Right? Because if we were all our biggest mistakes for the rest of our lives, that would be a really bad thing.
I'd be logging off right now.
Yeah. And so that's how I want to start.
Okay.
What he did was very stupid, and you should never do it, and he shouldn't be writing for Channel Fireball anymore, unfortunately. What he did, to give you guys some backstory, was Travis Wu was streaming on his very popular Twitch channel, streaming some Magic, and during a game of Standard in which he was, or not Standard, Modern, in which he was playing Honored Hierarch, which was also a problem, but a different problem, he decided that he was going to discuss with his stream audience a book that he had read recently and the ideas presented therein. The book was Mein Kampf, which was written by Adolf Hitler while Adolf Hitler was in jail. He discussed that book at length on his stream for over an hour. The video of that stream is no longer available on Twitch. However, I believe that a copy is available on YouTube if you look for it. And in it, he brings up some points that are traditionally brought up by Holocaust deniers as well as anti-Semites.
I just feel bad just talking about this.
That is the description of the events. I am a Jewish person, Aaron. A Jewish person culturally, if not practicing. Yeah. I am a little bit more practicing than you are. I'm Jewish.
A fair weather Jew. Yeah.
You're sure. The equivalent of there's like twice a year Catholics. The equivalent of that is a 3 times a year Jew. I'm like a 6 times a year Jew. I go to synagogue like 6-ish times a year. I don't go every weekend, but I'm a little more practicing than normal.
And I'm a white guy.
I keep Passover. Yeah, and you're just a generic white dude, right? You're secular Christian, as the description.
No, I'm kind
which is fine.
Atheist,
that's just generic.
Whatever.
So there's a bunch of things that happened in this that are worth discussing, but are dangerous to touch, because there are some things that when you discuss them, even intelligently, damage you as a person or as a public figure. You should not, and probably cannot, in all good conscience, discuss certain topics in public without having the ground rules set that that's what you do. If you're a historian, if you're a writer and are studying that subject, then if it's your focus, then perhaps you have more of an educated experience. But if you just read a book within the last week and want to talk about it, perhaps that's not the best idea. And so that's what Travis did, and unfortunately, he is paying the price for that. I don't think that he should be judged solely on that for the rest of his life. However, he definitely deserves to be punished, because the things that he said in his stream were not acceptable. And a lot of the things he said were very bad and historically not true. And I feel bad for Travis, but I also just can't in good conscience say that he should not have been removed from Channel Fireball.
So
for an indefinite period.
What I will say, as someone who has lived in a public type space, that I have, there's people who listen to what I say, which I appreciate, but just to know that if you are someone who is well known, who writes articles, who makes content, who does the thing, who represents a such and such, you're always on. You're always on. You're not like, well, because I did it over here, it's different. Or, oh, because I said this, at a party and somebody just happened to be recording me, that doesn't matter. No, it matters all the time. You should just be aware of it. You should be able to have some wherewithal to know what you say matters, what you say impacts people, and what you say can come back to get you.
And unfortunately, he also was not well informed. All he did was read a book and was not particularly well versed in the facts. He made several factually inaccurate statements. Several of those statements were damaging and are not things that should be said, regardless of whether he believed them or not. He was trying to play devil's advocate, but seemed to be more affected by the book's message.
The devil really doesn't need any help.
On. Exactly. That's the other thing. And so, it's tough, because I'm a big proponent of free speech. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm a content creator. I really like to talk, as you guys can tell. And so when people say things that hurt their careers, it hurts me, because I know that there are walls. I don't want there to be walls. It sucks, but there have to be walls, because if there aren't walls, then there's mass hysteria, dogs and cats living together. It's horrible. You need to have some rules. And unfortunately, one of the rules was broken, and he paid the price for it.
Aaron, any thoughts on that?
Oh. I have a rant deep in my spirit, but I'm going to try to keep it brief. Nobody got Travis Wu suspended but Travis Wu. This isn't a social justice thing. This isn't a white knight thing. This is about personal and corporate responsibility. And we went through this last year when What's His Nuts wrote that guest post for Star City. And then if you go on his Twitter
Jim
feed,
Davis.
No.
Nuts is nuts.
But there was a young man who wrote a post almost a year ago, almost a year ago to the day. He wrote a guest post for Star City Games and coming to find out that he supports Gamergate and he loves gay slurs and he loves telling feminists to get stomach cancer. And people were like, well, you got him fired and Drew Levin got him fired. No, he got himself fired. Like, let's stop the boat right there. What people don't understand is that these guys are not like you and I. Like, it's really easy to look at Jim Davis or to look at Brian Brown Dewin and say, he's me. Like, we wear the same clothes. And I came from a small town too. These guys are faces and names representing a brand and representing a company. If you want to say something stupid on your blog, like let's say you have a little WordPress blog or you have a little Blogspot blog, that's fine. Like there's a good chance that people are still going to be upset by it. But when your name is attached to a major company, you're messing with somebody's money at that point. And it's not personal, it's business. And if that's something that you're not up for because that comes with the territory, then you need to not even get in the business. Like if you know you're the type of person that likes to just pop off or say whatever you want, and let's say, you see these guys that are so excited that Star City wants them to write for them or TCG wants them to write, but they don't think about that when you sign and you agree to do that, there's certain territory that comes along with that. And these guys are just so excited. And then when things like this happen, they're like, well, I didn't sign up for this, but you did. And especially coming from the audience, this is another one of those topics that happens in cycles. And everybody always acts surprised. And everybody always says, well, how can you do this? This is business. You are messing up somebody's money here. You are a liability. That business has every right to be like, you know what? We don't really see it for you anymore. And so I don't really feel as bad when things like this happen because this is what you signed up for. Like you agreed to be the face of something, you agreed to represent something. If I throw a temper tantrum at a GP and somebody records it, you guys have the right to be like, you know what, we just don't want to work with you anymore. Cool Stuff has the right to say that. Gathering Magic has the right to say that. I can get mad at the people who recorded me throwing a fit. I can get mad at the person who live tweeted it, but I did that. And I just don't think we see enough of that accountability to be like, I did this. There's, how could this happen? You can't do that. No, you did this. And it does seem like Travis is taking accountability for this. Like I'm not seeing, the defenses that I've seen other people try to pull.
He wrote what felt like a very heartfelt apology post on Facebook.
And so that makes me very happy. But like I said, I would just like to get to the point where we move past this concept of, these guys are brands, these guys are representatives. And I'd really like to see the audience just start acknowledging that more instead of always acting surprised when this type of thing happens.
Sure.
Absolutely.
All right. So
it's not surprising. It is unfortunate. And as I mentioned, I think 100% Travis has everything that's coming to him. I just feel bad.
Yeah.
He deserves it, and that was a horrible thing for him to do. But you know what? I got a big mouth too. And so this is the kind of fate that could befall me. Not this specifically, but, I could say something stupid. I've done it before. Luckily, not in front of however many people were watching him on his stream. But it's just unfortunate, and it's a cautionary tale for anyone who's either in the public eye or hopes to be in the public eye someday.
There you go. Yeah. So we're going to move on to our last bit, as we do every single show. We call it the finisher. Recently, on Mark Rosewater's Tumblr Blogatog, he was asked in so many words if a return to Kamigawa was a done deal. Hold. Little P came out. Little P. Just little. All right. His answer, quote, I believe in Blogatog speak, it's code for it's already been designed. All right.
Contain yourself.
So
Evan. It's going to be okay.
With that revelation and shadows over Innistrad and Battle for Zendikar, what's the next return to set? Aaron?
Okay, got this. In 2017, Magic returns to a simpler and yet more complex time with pre-6th edition rules thanks to its newest expansion, Back to Back. We are back, bitches.
Ruben?
Yeah, batches were pretty complicated.
Yeah, batches were a thing.
Existed.
Yeah.
The Vancouver Mulligan proves to be too strong in New, Modern, and Standard. And so, with the next set, Magic looks to rectify the problem of not enough mana screw in We'll Always Have Paris Mulligans.
All right, so they've heard you, and your prayers have been answered. White bordered foils make their set debut in a traditional black bordered set in the spring of 2018. Get ready for We'll Be White Back. We'll be white black. We'll be white black.
We'll be white black.
We'll be white black.
And we'll be white black next week as well.
We will. As we round down this episode, we'll be white black. All right. So, and that ends another episode of Magic Mics. Thank you, Ruben, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Move on to our final slide here. So that was another episode. Thank you guys for joining us here to discuss all things Magic. You guys hanging out here for watching. Hope you guys support us at patreon.com/magicmics, which we appreciate all of our supporters there. And you guys are getting some incredible entertainment for those doing $5 pledges or more. I assure you, the pre-show for today was incredible. You may follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, and do everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv/magicmics, on Twitter at magicmicscast, on Reddit at reddit.com/r/magicmics, at Facebook at facebook.com/magicmics. And I will say right now, you go to magicmicspodcast.com because I built a brand new website for our podcast thanks to the Patreon supporters. You should go check that out. Talk to us privately on magicmicspodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmicspodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.